What is R? Well, I mean, aside from being the 18th letter of the alphabet. Star Trek junkies like myself may think that anything named after a letter of the alphabet is far more trouble than it's worth. And when you are first learning R, you may feel similarly. But if you stick with it, I think you'll find that it's an incredibly powerful platform for doing all sorts of quantitative wizardry. At core, R is a programming platform for advanced statistical analysis. In some senses, it's really just a super advanced calculator, but it can do so much more than a basic calculator can do. It's capable of handling massive data sets, potentially millions of records at a time, and doing all sorts of complicated statistical analyses and presenting all sorts of graphical and tabular output that it would take a human being weeks if not longer to do, assuming that it didn't make any errors in the process. Just like learning a foreign language like Spanish or Chinese or Arabic or German or anything really, learning R will take some practice, and it takes getting used to a variety of terms, verbs, nouns, and the like, as well as different ways of doing syntax. But unlike working in international relations, if you make a mistake in R, you're not going to potentially cause a small land war. At most, you'll just have code that doesn't work, and usually with a little time and maybe some frustration, you can figure out what to do to fix it. If that notion feels a little bit overwhelming to you, I'm going to ask you to just trust me for now. I have taught R to many different students over the last several years, and while yes, the learning curve is fairly steep, as long as you come to it with an open mind, in my experience, most people end up doing okay with it. I use R in this class for two reasons. First, it's free. It's open source software, and so that means you don't have to pay to download it. Unlike a lot of other statistical platforms like Stata, SPSS, SAS, and the like, this one is available for anyone to get as long as you have a computer and an internet connection. That also means you will be able to keep using it long after this course ends if you so choose. Second, it's growing in popularity across a variety of settings. There are many jobs out there where if you can list that you have some statistical programming ability, particularly in a language like R, that could be your leg in the door. In fact, there are even some that say up front that's the kind of thing they want. So just like learning another language like Spanish or Chinese can actually help open up job opportunities, learning some basic functionality in R could also give you that benefit when you go to start applying for jobs.
So how do you get it? Well, I'm going to show you a few websites for that. The first is the one here. If you would like to follow along with just a textual approach to doing this, the next minute or two of installing these programs follows everything that's on this particular page. So if the video isn't doing it for you, try going here and using that instead. But in terms of actually installing stuff, the first thing you will need to do is go to cran.r-project.org, and you will land at this page. And you will see three options here at the top. Choose the one that works for you. They have R for Linux, for Mac, and for Windows. I am a Windows user, and I am guessing probably most of you are. That does tend to be the more common platform that people use. So we're going to go through that one, but if you don't use Windows, just use the system that works for you in this case. So we'll click on Download R for Windows. And there may be a few layers you have to click through. So now it lands you here, and you want this top line that says binaries for base distribution. This is what you want to install R for the first time. And then yet another page. This is the current version as of the making of this video. It is R 4.2.1 for Windows. So you'll click on that. And then I'm in Firefox, and you can see it's already popped up the download window. Depending on the program you're using, it might be somewhere else, but you should see something somewhere on the screen that indicates it's downloading the program. And it will take a moment to do that. Okay, it's downloaded. So now click on the program itself to open. And follow through the prompts. And I usually let it go to whatever default program area it wants to put it to. Now, I already have it on my machine. I'm really reinstalling it just for you all to be able to see what it looks like. But you can just take all the acceptable defaults It's up to you whether you want to create a desktop shortcut. I'm not going to, but I'll show you why in a minute. That's because we have another program we got to install that we actually need, but the rest I'm going to leave. And there we go. Technically, you could stop here and run R, but it won't be a very user-friendly experience. Almost everyone today adds one more program, and that other program is RStudio. So if you go to this website here, www.rstudio.com/IDE, and in case you're curious, IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. Well, that'll redirect your web address just a bit, but you'll land here, which is what you want. And you're going to want to scroll down and get the RStudio Desktop. And you want the open source edition. I mean, you could get the Desktop Pro if you are feeling like throwing down $995 a year for it, but I'd say for now, free is probably a much better option. And then again, you may have a few layers to navigate through. It's going to keep trying to give you other stuff, but don't worry about it. Just go for that basic one there. Download RStudio for Windows. And again, if you're not using Windows, there's an option for something else in there to use instead. And then, just as with R, follow the prompts to download and install. I am not going to reinstall this because I don't think I need the latest version of RStudio, but we'll pick up there in a moment.
If you've made it this far, that is a significant accomplishment. If you're feeling really frustrated about it and you want to send me an email ranting about it, please feel free. Sometimes I feel a little bit better when tech is being frustrating to just complain about it to somebody else. My main goal for today was to get you set up in R for this week. We're going to save the tutorial for how to use it for next week. But before we wrap up today, I do want to take some time to have you go ahead and open the platform and look around a bit. And this is going to serve two functions. First, it's going to make sure that it's actually working for you so that you can hit the ground running next week. That's more important than you realize. And second, it'll give you a chance to just take a look around, have a little bit of tour of the program, and get your bearings on what's going on in this platform.
When you open RStudio, you want to make sure you're clicking on the correct icon. Now, I already have mine down in the taskbar, and I would recommend that you do that as well. It'll make it much easier to find, but you want to make sure you put the right thing there. You want this symbol down here. That's the blue circle with the white R in the middle of it. And if you don't have a shortcut on your desktop, or even if you do, maybe to confirm it, go to your Start menu and type R. And if you don't see RStudio itself come up, finish typing out at least the next few letters. If all you see is R, and I believe it's usually a blue letter R with no circle, don't open that. That'll take you to the language piece, but not to the RStudio piece. But click on that, and it will open up this screen for the first time. And then if you want to go ahead and put that on your taskbar, you should be able to right-click on that. And then mine says unpin, but you can say pin to taskbar. And that way it'll hold there, and you can always then just go click there anytime you're ready to get into RStudio. So, let's take a little look around. The first time you open it, it's going to look something like this. You're going to have 3 panes. There's going to be tabs on some of them. And you are welcome to rearrange these as you see fit. So you can, for example, move this bar around. You can move this bar around. And in a moment, we're going to have a 4th window, and there'll be a bar over here that you can move around as well. Now that you can open RStudio, let's do a quick orientation. And let's start with what's on the left here. This is the console. And the console is where the real magic happens. You might think of it as R's engine. Now, back in the days before RStudio, the console screen was all you would get. All of your code would run through this pane. And if you look where the little flashing cursor is, right next to it, that little greater than sign on the left of the screen, that is called the command prompt. So if I ever say anything about the command prompt, that's what I'm referring to. Technically, you could type all of your R commands here and run them. But I do not want you to do that. It builds very bad habits. So we are going to use script files instead, and I'll explain more about that in just a moment. So the action of R happens in the console, but the irony is that you'll actually interact with the console directly very, very little. All right, let's zoom back out here. And let's look at the top right for a moment here. The top right is the environment pane, and also the history pane, and you'll see a few other tabs there as well, but environment's really the only thing you're going to need from up there. The environment is sort of like R's reference library. It is where you will see a list of any data objects stored in active memory. Sometimes there might only be one or two things there. Sometimes there might be dozens of things there. Every time you open RStudio, you will see this message that the global environment is empty. And that's just because R always boots with a blank slate. But as you load data into R, the objects you create will show up here. If R ever tells you that it can't find some object, it's probably because you failed to load the object into its memory first. That, or you have a typo in your code. Now, there are a few buttons up top for opening, saving, and even removing objects. Be careful with this one because it'll remove everything that is in the environment all at once. But we generally don't use those. I'm going to show you how to do all of this with commands. All right, zoom back out again. And if we come down here to the bottom right, the Files pane is perhaps the most confusing to get into. It shows you the files available in what is called your working directory, and typically it defaults to the My Documents folder. Your working directory is the folder on your hard drive that R is focused on, and unless you explicitly tell it otherwise, R will only look for files in the working directory, and any files that you save will default into this working directory. So unless you want everything dumping into your My Documents folder, which is a really bad file management technique, then the first thing you will need to do when you open things up, each time, every single time you open RStudio, you will need to change the working directory. And I'll show you how to do that next time around, so don't worry about figuring it out now. Just know that is going to be the first thing you do almost every time you open this program. Now here's the confusing part. Files in the working directory are not in R's memory. R is able to see what is there if you tell it to go looking, but it cannot work with anything unless you load it into its environment. That is why you should always look in the environment pane for data objects. And a warning on the Files pane, anything you do through this pane matters. I once had a student delete most of her hard drive through this pane, and it did not give her those usual warnings. Are you sure you want to delete this? It just deleted it. And unlike sending files to the recycle bin, they were gone. She could not recover anything. So be very, very careful how you interact with this pane. I recommend using it just as a visual check and not to actually interact with any files. Now the Plots tab, this is where any graphical output that you generate is going to first appear. Right now there's not much available. You can see highlighted out the zoom button. Very often once you generate something you'll want to click zoom and it'll open out to a bigger screen so you can zoom in on a bigger version of it. If you make multiple figures, there will be some arrows here on the top left that let you toggle back and forth between them. And you can save your figures from here using the export command. But there will also be commands that I'll show you for being able to do that directly from a script file. And then in the Packages pane, this is likely one you're not going to need to look at, but I just want you to be aware of it. This shows you all of the packages currently installed on your system and which have been loaded into active memory. Those will be checked. Right now, just the base package. Now, packages are different from objects. If R is a language, think of packages as an extra set of verbs to use and objects as an extra set of nouns. Then the Help tab is logically where help files appear when called for. Now, Nearly every function in R has an associated help file, all written in a similar style. And to the novice, that style can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming and maybe less than helpful. What I mostly use it for is when I need to look up the nuances of some less common aspect of a command I'm using, or if I just need a reminder of how the syntax works. At first, the help files probably won't be that helpful to you, but as you get the basics of R down, I think you'll find that they will become more helpful. All right, let's zoom back out again, and let's talk about that mysterious, currently invisible fourth pane that I mentioned. And to help you see that pane so that we can talk through it, let's open up that file that I left right above this video on iLearn. If you don't have it, go download that into some folder. Pay attention to where you put it, because when we hit open, you're going to have to navigate to that folder. I've already set my working directory to that folder. If you want to try to do that, this is one of the few times I will let you do something at the console command prompt. But if you type that and then in quotes, you put the entire path leading to it, which I'll have to let you figure out how to do that because you probably don't have the same filing system I do. That'll set your working directory. If not, you can also come up here to File and click Open File. And if it defaults you to somewhere else, it's a normal file window that you're probably used to. Just navigate through until you find the folder you want. And then once you are in that folder, you will see that file 01A script, and it has the little RStudio icon next to it. Click on that, and then click Open, and it will pop up this fourth window up here at the top. This is the script pane, and this is where you will see your script files. And other than that one exception I just gave you, I want you to always be putting everything into your script file, run it from your script file. Everything you do needs to happen from a script file. Let's go ahead and get in good practice on this. So, what is a script file? Script files are really nothing more than basic text files. And if you didn't have RStudio open or you didn't have it installed, you could open it in Notepad and it would show up just fine. But the nice thing about doing it here is RStudio will help you with some of the formatting, including, as you can see on here, some color coding for easier reading. And we only have 2 colors right now. There will be more that will show up later as we get into some other techniques. But one of the first things to notice here is we've got all of this text up top that's in green, and this is what is called comments, and I'll let you read through the comments on your own. And then at the bottom we have these 3 lines of code that are actually going to do something for you. And the last thing I want you to do before you close out today is I want you to run this. You will only ever need to do this one time unless you have to reinstall RStudio. But it will save a lot of time for next week. So what I want you to do is highlight all of it, and you can either press Control-A, which will do that, or you can use your cursor to highlight everything. Highlight all of it, come up here to where it says Run, and click Run. And it's going to run through some commands, and you'll probably see a bunch of gibberish coming out to the screen. Just let it run in the background. Go ahead and finish this video in the meantime, and then you can come back to this after the video is done, and it should be complete.
Okay, that's enough for one lesson. Next week, I'll show you how to set a working directory, load libraries, load and save data objects, and even write some basic commands in a script file and run them. We'll also talk a little bit about data architecture, meaning what kinds of data objects exist and what they look like, and how you might do some transformations of them. And soon enough, you will be off and running for your own work. So, once those libraries have finished installing, you can go ahead and close RStudio. If it asks you to save anything, just tell it no thanks. And then we will reconvene again next week.